Hi everybody. Welcome to our webinar about demand management on ServiceNow. I will start this webinar with short introductions, then I will pass it off to Eric Fisch from Equinix, and after we will answer your questions. If you have any questions, you can enter your questions in the box on the right, and after the presentation, Eric will discuss them. If your question is unanswered, we will follow up with you within a few days with an answer. So I'm Eloise. I'm account manager at Kloves Inc. And we have invited Eric Fisch today from Equinix to talk about demand management on ServiceNow. They have been a customer for around 2 years, and we did several projects with them. And one of them was for demand management on ServiceNow. As you might know, we are a full ServiceNow implementation partner, and we offer a full ServiceNow shop. We do phase 1 and phase 2 implementation, and we have a very strong team with people with an engineering and or technical backgrounds. I don't want to spend too much time talking about Kloves Inc. So if you would like to see what we have done in the past, feel free to take a look at our portfolio on our website. I will now pass it off to Eric, and he will tell you about his experience with demand management on ServiceNow.
Okay, great. Thank you for the introduction, Eloise, and welcome everyone. Just to confirm, I want to make sure folks can hear me. Eloise, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly clear.
Okay, perfect. So thank you for attending, everyone. Today, I would like to talk about what we have done at Equinix for demand management. So demand management, the concept, I mean, there are a lot of different terms that folks use when they describe demand management. In this case, I am referring to the module that was released in ServiceNow, I believe, starting in the Eureka release. So we at Equinix implemented that module. We did quite a few configurations to meet our needs, and we implemented it in a way where from IT, we're able to properly manage all of the demand that we get when it comes to project requests and enhancement requests, and determine which ones we actually want to do from a priority perspective, come up with a business case using risk and value criteria, drive that through the entire prioritization cycle, and at the end of the day, decide which enhancements and projects that we want to do within a given release cycle or within a given fiscal year budget cycle. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen at this point. I have a couple slides that I can show, which talks about the roadmap that we had at Equinix and how we implemented demand management. So let me get things going. Eloise, one more time, can you confirm that you can see?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay, great. So just a quick introduction of myself. My name is Eric Fisch. I am the IT release manager at Equinix. I've been with the company for about 6 years now. I implemented ServiceNow at Equinix about 5 years ago. We started with, I'll just show you our quick ServiceNow program at Equinix. So in the beginning of 2011, we started with just a simple incident and problem management implementation for our end user technology and infrastructure teams. We expanded that a couple months later to change management and service catalog for business applications, including our BSAs and business application support. And from that point forward, we ended up getting a lot of demand from various business teams to use ServiceNow, similar to the way that IT is using it today at Equinix. And we expanded the platform. So we have quite a few different teams within Equinix that are using ServiceNow for various purposes. A lot of it focused around ticket management, basically replacing the basic demand management that many teams that we see at a lot of companies today use email for. So a lot of teams are basically just managing all of the requests that they get via email. So we've rolled out ServiceNow to a lot of those teams at Equinix to replace the simple type of email tasks that they're doing today. And then some of the other enhancements that we've done along the way is some automation, where we've done some user access provisioning automation, HR, case management, plus demand management, which is one of the major releases that we had recently. So just a quick overview of demand management and the purpose of it at Equinix. So we realized that we needed to introduce a way of prioritizing all of our project and enhancements demand, and coming up with a workflow-driven approval process to make decisions around which demand we want to actually prioritize. And we wanted to come up with a way where we could truly quantify that and establish things that are really going to generate value to our business at the end of the day. So if we have these projects and enhancements that are going to require a lot of time to build, but we're not really going to see the ROI at the end of the day, maybe these things are things that we don't want to do. Without having a way of coming up with that criteria up front, we would never know about it. So demand management created that window for us to the business and within IT to make a decision on which things actually make sense at the end of the day for us to implement. So just a quick background, we had a very non-standard way of managing our overall business case model at Equinix, where we had our cross-functional teams just having discussions, making very subjective decisions around which things that we wanted to prioritize for a given release or fiscal year, coming up with estimates around what we think the budget is, but not really coming up with where we see value coming back by implementing these things. So our goal was for us to come up with the right criteria that's going to allow us to quantify that ROI, give us an idea of what our net present value is and our IRR is for any projects or enhancements that we get from the business. We have a business operations team at Equinix that works with each of our cross-functional business teams to prioritize that demand, come up with what that business case looks like, and then we push it through the process to make a decision on which things we actually want to do. So our high-level business process, we have three major phases for that: request, prioritization, and execution. Execution is really the piece that happens after we follow our entire demand management process. Demand management is focused mostly on request and prioritization. So everything starts from business having an idea of something that they want to do. So we've released this to almost every user in the company from a business perspective to submit an idea of something they think would improve our overall business processes, whether it be a simple enhancement request to one of our business applications or introducing a new solution that may require a large investment but have a large return. So our business will go in, submit this request, fill out very basic information about it, not really getting into the point where they're filling out a full business case, but at least it's just this idea factory where they can submit these ideas of things that they would see as generating value to the business. Next step is it goes to draft. Our business team can then at that point review all the things that have been submitted and decide on things they really feel like they want to generate a business case around. So they'll go through that process. They'll work with our business operations team to better understand, what the right answers to some of these questions are along the way. So we have risk criteria that we're going to establish for each of our business cases. We have value criteria. There's a set of questions to go with each of those. And at the end of the day, there's a score that's given based on answers to each of the risk and value criteria questions. Once that's filled out, submitted, it goes to a requested status. And at this point, we're going to have a lot of different cross-functional teams having all their demand coming into ServiceNow and business cases filled out for them. And we have this bucket, this backlog of enhancement and project requests. And our business operations team now has an idea of what they can do with those and more or less force rank those against each other. So once it's in a requested stage, business operations team can confirm that all of the business cases are filled out properly, pass it off to the pre-qualified stage, at which point there's basically just a button they click in ServiceNow. It'll look at all of the demand that is also within the same pre-qualified stage and force rank them against each other based on answers to each of those questions, the overall score from a risk, value, and cost perspective and return on investment perspective, and give it a forced rank from 1 to n. And that would give us an initial idea of what we think from a quantifiable perspective makes sense for us to deliver as enhancements in projects. Of course, we don't rely 100% on that forced ranking. There are things that we have to take into account, like, is this a SOX requirement, or do we have to do this in some way to deliver more value to the business? Even if it's not from a quantifiable perspective, we know this is a must-have that we have to do in order for us to continue to stay operational. So those things we're always going to prioritize on top of everything else. But then we have the other things where we truly want to see some type of value back to the business at Equinix, and that's where we're going to see the force ranking coming into the picture. So pre-qualified gives us that idea. So if we have, let's say, 100 things that are in pre-qualified, we see a force ranking of 1 through 30 out of those 100 that we know we can deliver. Those are the ones that we're going to want to move to the next step as qualified. Then there would be a second round where business operations works with each of the cross-functional teams to review the ones that are qualified. And for each of our releases, at that point, we can decide if these are things that are feasible for us to deliver during a release. And once again, we can then force rank all of the demand that we have at the qualified stage against all the other demand that's at the qualified stage and give us another forced ranking. And then we can progress it forward to the committed status. And so once it's in committed, that's where we move out of the demand management cycle and into the actual project and enhancement execution cycle. And we've had that working fairly well at Equinix for a long time. So demand management is all of the preliminary stuff that needs to happen in order for us to get to the point where we're executing projects and enhancements. So business cases. So like I was mentioning, we have our risk criterion scoring. So we have a set of, I think, 8 questions here, which each of the questions have a certain score assigned to it based on the answer to that question. And the answer to that question, the score is aligned to the type of project or enhancement it is. So we have 4 main buckets that these can fall into. We have innovation, growth, productivity, and maintenance. So based on a combination of the type of enhancement in project and the answer to one of these questions, that individual question is going to be given a score. And once all the questions are answered, the total score is going to be established for that particular project or enhancement from a risk perspective. So of course, the higher the risk, the less desirable it will be to implement this particular enhancement or project. So simple questions: has the scope been identified for this project or enhancement? Do we have support from stakeholders? What's the complexity of the project or enhancement? What's the degree of change that the business would be experiencing as a result of implementing this? Do we have proper business ownership identified for this? Do we have sponsorship around that? Do we already have budgeted financial resources available? Do we have to go to the street and find folks to help, from a professional services perspective? Or can we implement this based on resources we already have? Same thing from an SME resources perspective. Do we have our BSAs that have an understanding of this, that we can leverage and have capacity to implement these kind of projects and enhancements? Or do we have a workaround? Is there something that we could do in the meantime, or is this something that we have to have in place, or we don't have any other option? So those are our basic risk questions that give us an idea of what our overall risk criteria is going to be for this project or enhancement. Same thing applies for our value criterion scoring. So we have our 8 questions that are assigned to that. And it's also aligned, of course, to the type: innovation, growth, productivity, or maintenance. So the questions include improving mission-critical business processes. So is this actually going to generate value at the end of the day for, our quoting team when we want to get a new quote generated from a customer and turn this quote into an order? Is that overall process going to be more streamlined if we implement this enhancement, or if we have a new solution that we want to implement? So are there business-critical processes that we're improving by doing this? Is this project affecting infrastructure or systems for future investments. So do we have a revamp of a lot of the infrastructure supporting some of our business critical applications that are going to end up saving us a lot of money at the end of the day? Are there project benefits being gained immediately? So how quickly are we actually going to see benefits by implementing this? Is it going to be within the first month? Is it going to take a year before you really start to generate value out of this? How much financial benefit is expected? So some of these, some of the questions are yes or no, some of them are high, medium, low. So we have varying answers and the score is assigned based on that. Are we addressing regulatory or compliance risk factors? So like I mentioned before, is this a requirement from a SOX perspective? Do we have certain SEC regulations that we're mitigating based on implementing this? So there's a lot of factors that come into play when we make a decision on how important this project or enhancement is from a mitigation perspective. Will this request be customer facing? So we tend to put a higher priority over the things that are customer facing versus the things that tend to be not customer facing, because of course, if we're improving customer experience, that's going to, in general, from a subjective perspective, at least, generate more value within Equinix. Does this project align with our current business strategy? So at the beginning of the year, we do come up with various overall strategic alignments that we typically want to have all of our project enhancements aligned against. So we always want to determine if anything that we're working on is aligned directly with that. If it is, then that typically takes priority over anything else that we're working on. And then is this have some kind of urgent time to market value at the end of the day? Do we have some kind of major enhancement that we need to do to our customer portal that's going to support one of our new products that we're releasing? So there are certain features that we have to take into account, and we know we have to implement because it's important in order to align to some other initiatives we have going at the same time. Then we look at our estimated cost and savings. So we have two major criteria that we're trying to come up with as our net present value and our internal rate and return. And this is ultimately going to give us an idea of what our overall cost of the project is going to be and how long it's going to take for us to see that return on investment, and what is our overall net present value and internal rate on return. And the different criteria that establish that is our t-shirt size. So that gives us an initial gauge where people don't have to think too hard about, what am I really thinking about investing in this project or enhancement. They can at least come up with an idea by working with IT if required, to say, well, how many resources do we think we're going to need to implement this? Are we going to need to do license purchase for new software? Are we going to have infrastructure costs? We can gauge that and then say, well, we think this is a medium-sized project or enhancement. And we have some basic t-shirt sizing, estimated CapEx and project OpEx costs that go along with that in order for us to give us at least an initial gauge on what we think the overall cost of this is going to be. Now, later on in the process, we have a point where we can update that manually to say, yes, we classified this as a medium, which we know project CapEx is going to be around 200K from a t-shirt sizing perspective, but in reality, we know this is actually going to cost more like 450K from a CapEx perspective, but maybe the OpEx is a little bit lower. So we can adjust that later, but this gives us that initial gauge. The number of years to depreciate the capital. So we can choose 1 to N, meaning we know that this particular enhancement is going to be in place for the next 4 years. So we're not really going to start to see the depreciation until after that point, where we're going to maybe start on a new enhancement, or we're going to have some other new system that's going to come into place to replace that down the road. Number of months to actualize the savings. So how soon are we actually going to start to see our return on investment? And then at the point that we start to see our return on investment, what is going to be our savings per month? We can choose to put dollars. We can say that we know for a fact that we're going to be saving $50,000 a month, just as a hypothetical. or we can choose to say that we're going to be saving man hours. Now, man hours, we do translate to a dollar figure. I know that it doesn't always work that way because we basically free folks up to spend time on other projects or enhancements. But the idea is that we can say if we have a standard, rate card of X, and we know that we're saving Y number of hours, we can easily do a calculation to say that this, technically speaking, is the number of dollars that we're saving based on the number of hours that we're saving. And then the combination of all this criteria gives us an idea of what our overall NPV and IRR calculations are going to be. Okay, so after we get all of our risk value and cost and savings estimates, we move on to the pre-qualified and qualified ranking stages. So like I mentioned before, we start with our pre-qualified stage, where we take a combination of our risk score, our value score, our NPV, and our IRR, and we can force rank each of those against the corresponding elements for all of the other projects and enhancements that are in the pipeline that are also within the pre-qualified stage. And once we do that, we're going to be able to force rank those. So we can choose to force rank it by each of those elements, but the system will also do the calculation based on looking at all the elements and how they compare to all the other elements for every other demand that's in the system, and then force rank it based on just that final ranking at the end. I know it's a little confusing and convoluted, but to sum it up is we have risk value given one score, and each of the projects are going to have ranking of 1 through N for that. We have NPV. Each of the projects give a ranking 1 through N for that, and we have IRR, at which point each of the projects are going to be given a ranking from 1 to N for that. We give a weight of 33% to each of those. We come up with a total sum, and then we force rank it based on that. So that's how we come up with our overall ranked priority for our demand when it's at the pre-qualified stage. Same thing applies when it's at the qualified ranking. So we'll have a smaller set that we're working on, but it's going to use the same calculations to rank them at the qualified stage as well. Okay, so next thing I want to do here is give you guys an opportunity to see what we have in ServiceNow. And I have an instance that is non-production, but has all of the features that we've implemented for demand management that I can show you real time. So this is just our simple front page that we use at Equinix. We try to keep it very simple from a user perspective. They just have 3 options. They can go to our service catalog by clicking order things. They can just submit a basic issue through Fix or Enhance It, or if they have a simple question, they can go to Ask Us. So under our service catalog is where we've implemented this service catalog item for demand management. And we have the catalog item under business case at the top right here. So first thing, one of our business users are going to do is come in here and create the demand with very basic information, not actually going through the process of completing full business case, but at least, like I mentioned, this more or less idea factory of coming up with something that they think would potentially improve business processes, but not really getting down to the point of creating a business case for this yet. So we're just going to give a quick short description for this enhancement. Let's just say this is an enhancement. What kind of investment type? What are we supporting here? So let's say we're supporting productivity. What do we think at an initial gauge the t-shirt size is going to be? This is going to be adjusted later, but we'll say that this is a small enhancement based on at least what you think from an initial business perspective. And then you can provide a more detailed description about the enhancement. If we have an idea of who the business owner is going to be, we can select that. So I'll just put in Brian Lilly, our CIO at Equinix, as the business owner here. And let's say he's also our executive sponsor. Brian has a wonderful trait of going directly to folks and saying, we need to do this right now. So I'd love to put Brian's name here. Tends to be both the business owner and the sponsor at times. We'll say this is mostly affecting our North American region. So we are a global company. We have a presence in North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific. We've actually also expanded recently to Brazil. So we're not just North America these days. We're also South America. So we just call ourselves Americas. Which portfolio is this enhancement likely going to be aligned to? Is this applications, or is this going to be aligned to, let's say, our global infrastructure portfolio, if this is an internal infrastructure project? What's our functional area? So we have all of our functional areas listed out here. So I'll say this is supporting an IT internal project. And then what configuration item is going to be primarily impacted? And this is really more for which business service or which application. So today we have all of our business services within our CMDB as actual applications. So let's say we're doing an improvement to ServiceNow. So now I submit this. Now I have our first business case submitted. So we're having a new enhancement request for ServiceNow. And this is going to come into the queue. Nothing has to be done with this right away. User or someone from that user's department can come back in and fill out the rest of the corresponding information. So just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to go ahead and fill this out. So next thing is to actually provide business case information, our risk value criteria, and our estimated savings and cost. So business priority, what's our initial gauge? This isn't going to apply for the actual scoring, but at least it gives us an idea of what we feel the business priority for implementing this enhancement is. We can select which departments are impacted by this. So if I say I'm implementing an enhancement that's going to be cross-functionally impacting every user that uses the ServiceNow platform, I'm going to want to select every single one of those departments here. So I'll say sales is impacted, HR is impacted, just to give you an example. So I'll put those three in there. Doesn't drive anything from a workflow perspective in here. It just gives us additional visibility on what the overall impact is of implementing this enhancement. So yes, this is cross-functionally impacting. Is this required for SOX? Do we have a business owner identified? So because I already explained each of these questions and how they work, I'm not going to go through that again, just to save some time here. Just giving an example of some answers to questions. Then, of course, I can add comments based on why I answered a question a particular way. Gives our business operations team a little bit more information to work with before they sit down with the business teams to validate the answers to those questions. Which is strategic alignment. Is this project or enhancement aligned with, or is there an other? There's always another option in that particular case for that question. Okay, so now I filled out my value criteria. Let me move on to my estimated savings and cost. Will this require additional CapEx? We'll say yes. Number of months to actualize savings. Let's say we're not going to see anything for 6 months once we get this implemented. Are we saving in dollars or hours? So if we say hours, how many saved per month? Let's say we're saving 50 hours per month. Just to make it look a little better, say 100 hours per month. And then we have to provide an idea of why we think that we're going to actually see those savings. And then these numbers are determined based on that initial t-shirt sizing that I provided. So I selected this as a small enhancement. So we can see our t-shirt size right here, and that automatically provided an initial estimate of our 5,000 of OPEX investment and no CAPEX investment. And once I save this, I'm going to see that my NPV is automatically calculated based on the provided information. So that takes into account anything that was provided under the estimated savings and cost. Our risk criteria gave us a score of 39. So overall, low risk. And our value criteria gives us a score of 70. So we're seeing a high amount of value coming out of this. So the balance score at the end is a 31 for that. So the next step is to move this on to our review stage where it goes to our business operations team, and they'll sit down with each of the functional areas and review all the demand they have, validate that the business cases look legitimate, are filled out correctly, and they can move these on to the pre-qualified stage. So at the pre-qualified stage, I can come down here and under the business case module, I can click on the filter for pre-qualified, look at everything in here that's already pre-qualified. So I can see that we had 5 other things before I submitted this new enhancement request that were in the pre-qualified stage, and those have been force ranked against each other. And now I've got a 6th thing in here. So if I select the option to calculate rank priority at the pre-qualified stage, which is at the bottom of the list view here, simple UI action, that's going to run a process behind the scenes that's going to calculate what the new forced ranking is going to be based on the new set of pre-qualified demand in the pipeline. So this takes just a minute to run. This doesn't get run very often. If I run this again, so now I see a new ranking at the pre-qualified stage. So that new enhancement request got put into the pre-qualified backlog, and I can see that this was given a 3 compared to the other 6 that are also within the pre-qualified stage. And the next thing I can do is I can say I'm going to take these 4. Actually, I don't have that enhancement implemented. Ideally, we should be able to just go in and select the 4 and then say move on to the qualified stage. At this point, we do have to go to each individual one, and we have to select qualified. So let's say I'm going to take the first 3 and move it on to the qualified stage. Okay. So now if I go to the filter for qualified, here's the new 3 that I just moved into the qualified stage. And I had 21 other ones before I did that were already in the qualified stage. And I can go down here and click, once again, calculate ranked priority for qualified. Once again, it takes a minute for this one to run. Probably another couple seconds here. Again, this is something that folks don't do on a daily basis. It's when our business operations team comes in here maybe once a quarter or even during our annual prioritization cycle, they'll run this. So performance on this function is not that important considering how infrequently it's used, but it does take time based on the amount of calculations it needs to do behind the scenes. Okay, so it looks like we're done. So if I rerun this filter, then I'll see our new force ranking based on everything that's in our qualified stage. And then the next step is I can move things to our committed stage. So once we decide on things that we feel we are going to deliver within a given release cycle, we can move those ones forward, and then we're going to see things that are ultimately in our committed stage. And then we have integration built between demand management and either project management or change management. So we have both those modules fully implemented, been in use for a long time at Equinix. So what we've done is just built this layer as a preliminary step before it enters our project management stage, where we use to track the status of all projects that are in actual execution, or change management, which we use to manage the overall execution of our smaller enhancement requests. So those are the two modules that we've been using for a long time. And at the point that we have things that are committed, we're making a decision to either create a project request or create an enhancement or a change request, a change request or a project request. To be more specific, a change request or a project record, because we're not really at the request level for projects anymore. But the change management workflow we really have implemented to manage all of the activities that are required when we're going through our execution, our build, our system testing, our UAT, and ultimately our business owner sign off before we go to production. So that's the point that we actually create our change request, is once we have our demand committed. And that's what we've done for demand management. So I think at this point, I would like to open it up to questions. We have our chat window available within the GoToMeeting. If you have any questions, feel free to type something in the questions bar. And it looks like we might have some already, so let me see if I can read this. Hold on one moment, please, folks. One moment. For some reason, it's a little tough for me to read these. Okay. So the first question I have here, who are the members of business ops team? Okay, yeah, so the first question I have here is, who are the members of the business ops team? So we have a team that was specifically created to align to the business as the team to go through our entire prioritization cycle. So they're the ones that work with each of our business team, like our sales, our operations, our customer service. So all those different teams that are there to serve a purpose, our business operations team works with each of them to make sure that whatever kind of changes that they're making to their environment are going to make the most amount of sense, and work with them to make decisions around like what things they need to prioritize for a given release in this case, plus there are some other functions to make sure they operate properly. Hopefully that answers that question. And again, if there are any other questions, feel free to, follow-up questions, type them within the question section here. And then if there are other things that you would like additional follow-up after this webinar, I'm happy to, do email exchange or even some phone calls later on. So just go on to the next question here. What does the scoring model look like? Not sure if I fully understand that, but maybe I answered that. Maybe this question was asked earlier on before I showed that. But overall, our scoring model was what I showed in terms of our risk criteria, value criteria, and our cost and savings estimates. So a combination of those three gives us what our actual scoring is. And then those, of course, are mapped to the type of project or enhancement that we have. The next question I have here, does pre-qualified relate to the state screening out of box? I'm not familiar with exactly which one is out of box for the various states. I know that how we've configured it, and I don't recall what was the out of box values for demand management. I know we've done quite a few different configurations. I believe that we completely ignored all the out-of-box ones, and we found the ones that we found that aligned more to the way that we operated from a business perspective at Equinix. So I'll have to validate, and I can always get back to the person that asked this question, and certainly send it out to the rest of the folks if other people have the same question. But I believe that we are not currently using any of the out-of-box states that were part of demand management. We just used our own. The next question here is, how can you manually set ranked priority? So if I go into a particular, I believe we implemented this where you can actually update that field and then progress it forward. No, actually, I correct myself. So it wasn't a matter of updating the field. So I can choose, if I have something 1 through 30 that are in a pre-qualified state, and I know there's something that I still want to move to qualified even though it's not within the top ranking, there's nothing preventing me from moving that from pre-qualified to qualified. It's just a decision that I have to make to say that I'm taking this and I'm moving it forward. So it's not a matter of updating the ranking. The ranking is something that gives us a gauge on what we want to choose to move from one stage to the next. But ultimately, we can choose to move anything that's in the list from the current stage onto the next one. Okay, and can you show what the reporting looks like? Sure, so a lot of the reports we have are really through just the simple filters that we have here. But if I give you an example of, the type of reports, if, folks on the webinar here are familiar with the robust capabilities of doing current state reporting with ServiceNow, it's very simple to generate a new report based on any criteria. We don't have some of the basic reporting that demand management provides based on assessment, which include bubble charts. We're actually working on implementing that now. And I'm happy to show what we've done later after we have those in place. But really our reports are limited to things like a simple example is we want to see how many things are created per week, demand-wise, and what types they are. So we can see a very simple example, and it's very easy to filter, slice, and dice this. So we don't have any predefined reports that we've created. We tend to create some of these type of reports on the fly as needed, just because it's so quick and easy to generate them. And then, of course, there's the set filters to give you those simple list views based on things that are either at a particular pre-qualified stage or qualified stage along the way. Okay, next question here is knowledge management used for demand management? So currently we don't have any integration between our knowledge management and demand management. Those two are completely independent. We don't have anything really on the roadmap to integrate the two. At the top, from the top of my head, I can't really think of a solid use case around how knowledge management would be useful for demand management, since they're fairly different purposes. But I think it's a good question, and I'll think that one through a little bit more, and I can certainly get back to you guys. And the next question here is, do you have sample reports to show the results of the number of requests submitted, approved, etc.? So yes, I mean, the example that I gave gives you an idea of the kind of volume that you get. I give a simple trend chart, but the reporting capabilities in ServiceNow are very easy to generate lots of different types of charts based on the current state of all the demand that's in the system. It's a little different than doing the kind of like BI reporting or analytics that you would get out of other solutions like Numerify has an offering around analytics, and ServiceNow has their own offering around performance analytics. Doesn't do the level of previous state versus current state, but it does give you the ability of it does give you the ability of, doing what overall volume is, for example, and then what the types of the demand are. And the next question here is, how long did it take to build and implement the module? So we did our implementation over approximately 3 months, keeping in mind that there was no individual from Equinix that was 100% dedicated to implementing this. This was something where we had to do incrementally based on other priorities really being in place. So I'd say it took us 3 months, but if we had 100% focus, we probably could have gotten this done within 30 days. Next question, can you get a copy of the webinar? And it looks like that was answered already. So the webinar is recorded, and a link will go out to all the participants tomorrow. Next question is, would you be willing to share your detail of scoring weighting? Yes, I'm happy to do that. If anyone wants a greater understanding on, how we decided on what our scoring is, I'm happy to have a separate offline conversation with those individuals. So Kloves, I'll work through Kloves and make sure that we can get in touch and have follow-up discussions to talk about that. And if people are really interested, I can see if I can even get folks from our business operations team who gave a lot of input into what that scoring criteria looks like, and have them, give their input as well. Next question, to clarify, are you using ServiceNow Project Management or MS Project? If MS Project, do you have that integrated? So we are using ServiceNow Project Management. We're using it on a very light level today, not so much to do the full task management associated with the project, with all the milestones and critical paths and all the other common stuff that you do from a project management perspective. We are currently evaluating a few different tools for project management. So just to finish my thought, we are using ServiceNow to manage mostly just the health of the project, which is a subjective yellow, green, red status indicator based on the project manager's, indication of what they think their project is, and then very basic budgeted versus actual cost based on what the project manager puts in the project record. So we're not using it to actually do full project execution, task assignment, and resource allocation, etc. We are looking at a few options. ServiceNow is one of the candidates that we are looking at today. And we will be finding something that does integrate with Microsoft Project. I know ServiceNow Project does integrate with MS Project, where you can minimally export a project from ServiceNow into MS Project, and you can also import an MS Project back into ServiceNow. Next question, what was the team size? I'm assuming that's referring to the implementation team size. So we had really one developer that we contracted with from Kloves to do the full requirements gathering and implementation. It didn't take a very large team to do the implementation. From an Equinix perspective, we had one business analyst and one SME from our business operations team that was focused on, providing requirements, doing our full testing, and rolling it out to our users. The next question we have here is, do you allow projects to be created in project, or are all projects from the demand management module? So since we rolled out demand management, we are forcing users to go through demand management and not creating projects directly in the project module. We have some backdoor capabilities of still doing it manually in the cases where, let's say there was a project that we've had in flight for a long time, we haven't been tracking it in ServiceNow, but we know that we want to make sure that we get a record created. So we have ways of creating those without going through demand management. But the idea is that anything new that we're going to start execution on from a project management perspective, we should go through demand management first, and there's no other option. We need to have a business case, and we have to go through our prioritization cycle. Let me see here. That looks like that's all the questions I have in the queue for now. I'll give it another just couple minutes here to see if anyone else has any other questions that I can answer, since we have about 7 minutes left. And I'll give it about maybe 60 seconds. And like I mentioned before, if anyone is interested in learning more about how we've used demand management so far, any more detailed questions about what I've shown you, I'm happy to have additional discussions, get into more detail on that. So feel free to work through Kloves. They can work on arranging discussions and meetings.
Definitely. Thanks, Eric. I don't think we have any more questions. If you do have any questions, you can contact me, and I'll bring you in touch with Eric. So thank you, Eric, so much for this great presentation, and thank you all for attending this webinar. If you have any more questions about demand management, or if you have other ServiceNow related questions, feel free to reach out to me at eloise.dershant@klovesinc.com. Also, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. So as I told you before, or Eric told you before, we recorded this webinar. So if you would like to share it with your colleagues or would like to watch it again, we will send you an email with the link to the webinar, probably tomorrow. We will have a webinar every month, so keep an eye on our social media. We will also update you through email about that. So we hope to see you next month. And thanks again for attending this webinar, and I wish you all a great day. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.